This time on Video Game Tango, Netease blames some jerk for not having WoW in China anymore. The Disco Elysium lawsuit is just now putting on its dancing shoes. Call of Duty will probably continue coming to PlayStation. Valheim's Mistlands update brings more fun and magic to the game. Starfield isn't going to require you to siphon gas from your neighbors just to play a little longer. And Pokemon Scarlet and Violet might be good games, but the best bits still haven't loaded in.
I'm Nick, and your mom loves my same type attack bonus.
Hi, I'm Josh. My parents are really concerned about the type of Pokemon I'm catching.
My name's Andy. This is Video Game Tango. Hey, welcome back.
I've missed everybody.
Yeah, it's been a long time, it feels
Hey, your
like.
aim is shit.
I mean, dude, I got the aim of a stormtrooper. I'm just out here ricocheting off plot armor.
For 2 weeks.
Turns out Halo Infinite's a gray game. Josh can't hit shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
This game sucks. Well, we've got follow-up. Happened last week, but we didn't do a podcast
Fallout?
last week. No, follow-up.
Oh, that's
Fallout up would be a great pun.
Fallout up, yeah. So we talked about Activision Blizzard and NetEase not coming to consensus about how they were going to distribute their games and ending on what seems like bad terms with each other. To follow up, it definitely does seem like there's a little bit of fucking blood in the water. Simon Zhu, or Zhu, I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Is there an H in it?
It's
probably Zhu.
Z-H-U.
It's probably Zhu.
Says, now, this guy here, he is the, oh my God, he is the Chinese, but nope, he is the guy that does stuff.
He's the Chinese guy who does stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's one of the bosses for NetEase. I had it all figured out here, but now I don't.
Welcome to our podcast.
Yeah, so YOLO.
Might look nicer if he smiled. He looks kind of grumpy.
So he's one of the head honchos. He's in the executive suite. Says, as a gamer who spent 10,000 hours in the world of Azeroth, StarCraft, and Overwatch, I feel so heartbroken as I will no longer have the access to my account and memories next year. This is translated from Chinese. One day when what has happened behind the scenes could be told, developers and gamers will have a whole new level of understanding of how much damage a jerk can make. Feel terrible for players who lived in those worlds. So I thought this one was just fun.
This is like straight out of LiveJournal.
Yeah.
The like passive aggressive spitefulness where you don't even really exactly address what the issue is.
Yeah.
What is he talking about?
Well, that's where the speculation comes in, because it seems like he is narrowing down to a person that stopped this deal from happening.
Okay, and what was the deal again?
Well, it was to allow NetEase to be the distributor of Activision Blizzard properties in China. Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, like, I feel like it has to come down to one of two people, right?
If it's a jerk, probably.
If it's a jerk. So, I mean, the natural inclination is to lean on Bobby Kotick.
Fuck you, Bobby.
But that's the natural way to lean. The other way is maybe Phil Spencer.
Yeah.
I think that might be a more interesting choice. Microsoft really wants to buy Activision Blizzard, and how the Chinese handle American information, we're not careful with it. So how they handle it is could be a problem.
Yeah.
So I could see that being a chit in the pile of like, hey, let this happen. You know.
Sure. Sony's pursuing the SEC to continue looking into the merger, and is pushing them hard to submit court filings to stop the acquisition of Activision Blizzard from Microsoft. And one of the things that they might have had to do was, for now, cut ties with NetEase and China for the time being, because they don't want ammunition against them in the court filings from the SEC, potentially. So I could see Phil Spencer being the jerk that stopped these things from happening, right? But a new one joins Super Smash. It's Phil Spencer, right?
What baffles me, and maybe this is partially due to the translation from what I assume is Mandarin, is that what does that have to do with his personal experience with Blizzard games?
Well, his personal experience with
like his like his experience has been forever tarnished.
I mean, that's what it sounds. It definitely sounds like he's talking about he's commiserating with the other people that play Blizzard properties, because he said he's spent 10,000 hours in the world of Azeroth, StarCraft, and Overwatch, and it sounds like he's lamenting the loss of the Blizzard properties as much as fellow gamers would.
Well, all the diehards have to realize, as much as the rest of us, that Blizzard is dead.
Yeah,
and there's a new Blizzard.
There is a new Blizzard.
The sooner you realize that, the better your mental health.
Hopefully, there will be a new Blizzard pretty soon.
Yeah,
and shit'll be good.
I would love to see a full cycle.
You think it'll be the reanimated corpse of the old Blizzard?
Like a mummy.
Like a
dry Blizzard.
A dry zombie. I don't know. It's hard to tell. You never know. With the monetization schemes that like all of your biggest publishers are pushing for, Microsoft seems to be a little bit less pushy than like Activision Blizzard has been.
It's because Microsoft learned their lesson after all their fucking lawsuits in the aughts and the 90s.
Right.
They know not to fuck around anymore.
So things might get better under Microsoft. You never know. What I'm looking forward to is just a change in management, because what they're doing now isn't working, right? So a big change is needed, and hopefully this is the big one, the right one.
I mean, you have to ask what you said it's not working now. Like,
the monetization is
a ton of money.
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, for sure.
Really, it depends on the metric you're measuring by.
But if we want to talk in terms of things like morality, let's not even talk about the business, right? Let's just talk about how they're treating their employees, how women have been treated in the workplace, all the sexual harassment allegations, suicide on their watch, stuff like that. Endless crunch for developers, not being paid enough, union busting, that kind of thing.
Union busting.
Right? Yeah. Where Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick has spoken out against unionization. Phil Spencer has talked about not necessarily for unionization, but has recognized unionization before Bobby Kotick. Now, that could all be lip service. He doesn't own Activision Blizzard yet, right? Yeah. So he could be lip service. He is still a CEO of a giant, well, not a CEO, but a president of a giant company.
I mean, but I mean, you don't hear people who work at Microsoft coming out and being like, yeah, I was, like force-fed booze on my first day there. Like, they forced me to get drinks at lunch, and then I had to go to a party at, you're not hearing those allegations out of Microsoft.
Yeah.
All that stuff will have weight once it starts affecting their bottom line.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we will see.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, that stuff has caused some issue with their bottom line. That's why Activision Blizzard is seeking desperately for other monetization schemes. They've even talked about it as much in their investor calls, that the negative publicity towards them has made them look into other monetization schemes because they're losing players. Mm-hmm. So there are some players out there that are actually leaving Activision Blizzard titles. Yeah, and it's a vocal minority, but it's a positive one. So hopefully and it does seem like that, for all it's worth, I did watch a good presentation from Preach Gaming, who has been a big voice in the WoW world for years. He stopped playing. Well, he didn't stop playing. He stopped streaming and doing videos for World of Warcraft quite some time ago because he disagreed with the way the game was being manipulated and changed. He disagreed with the philosophy going forward with new expansions, and he disagreed, obviously, with the happenings at Activision Blizzard, as far as the moral part of it. So he decided that he was going to stop doing that a long time ago. But recently did visit Blizzard campuses and talked to a bunch of the head developers and like Ian Hazacostas at Activision Blizzard. And it does seem like they have the creative side of Activision Blizzard has been given a lot more power in the way the game is being created now. It seems like the monetization schemes have been lessened. Time gating is kind of a thing of the past with Dragonflight, which is positive. Because right now, you can unlock almost everything there is available in Dragonflight until the next, patch comes out, right? Like the next major content patch, which is how it had been done in older expansions. But in newer expansions, they really time gated the shit out of stuff, like even between major patches. So it looks like most of that's gone, and I think that's a positive direction as far as the game's concerned. Yeah. So, it's fixing the rest of the toxicity in Activision Blizzard that I'm looking at and hoping for in the future.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I'm still of the opinion that they're using scalpels where they need to use an axe.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we'll see if that ever changes.
Yeah, I mean, there are still a lot of people that just enjoy World of Warcraft, and they enjoy Diablo 3 and are looking forward to Diablo 4. There's still plenty of those people, but I tend to agree with you. I don't think World of Warcraft necessarily needs the axe, but I think it needs more scalpels.
It's one way to look at it. I mean, we could talk ad nauseum about WoW and where it should go, and it's at this point I am so inured to Blizzard's bullshit that I don't care.
For sure,
Like, let them fix the stuff. We'll get the new Blizzard. After the new Blizzard, we'll go from a dry zombie to the old good wet zombie.
That's right. Yeah. Before the show, we were talking about how mummies are just dry zombies, and which likewise.
Isn't true, but maybe it is. We don't know.
Yeah. So
jury's still out.
Just so it's understood where that reference is coming from.
If a mummy bites you, don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah. You're not going to catch mummies.
In similar corporate video game news, my personal pet project that I've been following, the lawsuit between the Zaum Idea Collective relating to Disco Elysium and their suit against the people who hold the IP, is evolving. So, Disco Elysium, if you've been following this at all, the original creators of the idea of Disco Elysium, the world and the universe, they essentially got ousted out of the company. And after some amount of time, clapped back, and there's been bickering back and forth, and now there's finally a lawsuit. What's interesting, there's this big article that I could go over all the nitty gritty, but the important thing is that the Zaum Collective, who is essentially suing the current holders of the IP, let me see if I can get the names. We've got Robert Kurvitz and Alexander Rostov, who were allegedly forced out of the Zaum Collective late last year, are suing the CEO, Ilmar Kompas, and former EP, Tonis Havel, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who was recently convicted of investment fraud in 2015.
Yeah.
What's interesting and what I liked about this article is that speaking to the news people, Kompas denied the existence of a lawsuit against him, and Havel called the allegations completely absurd. Both were then shown the legal documents showing the suit by the outlet and did not respond. So the fact that these people who have likely completely frauded out the original creators of the IP by apparently selling concept art for the next Disco Elysium for $1 to a shell company and then buying it back for $4.5 million in an attempt to steal money from the company, are just denying the fact that there's a lawsuit, even though it's on public record.
It's like they forget that the internet exists.
Yeah, it's kind of baffling. And it gives me a spiteful hope that the original creators of this world are going to win this suit and potentially get some, grievance satisfied out of all this.
Some comeuppance.
Yeah. It's not a big article, and I don't want to go too into the depths, but it's just, there are signs, at least to me from reading this, that things might move forward in the direction that they should.
In the right direction.
That the original creative people who got tricked out of the company are going to win this suit and potentially get some comeuppance. So.
Yeah.
Good news.
How did they get ousted? Does it go into that, or?
So, I mean, I'd have to scroll through this. Basically, after Disco Elysium went well, as a reminder, there was a few people, 2 or 3, that originally were starting to create a universe, just like the Marvel universe. They were creating the Disco Elysium universe, and this video game was in a long line of art projects that were in this universe. And I'm trying to remember how exactly they got ousted, but they essentially got cut out. They got quickly excluded from daily operations, quote, in a Medium post where they had clapped back at the original people. And then they essentially got fired. And then the head, it's very complicated.
It is.
I don't have it off the top of my head. But yeah, essentially they got tricked out of the company is probably the best way of putting it.
Okay.
It might not be entirely accurate, but that's the easy answer. But the people who are being sued, the seemingly antagonists, like I said, got found in 2015 for all kinds of fraud. And the lawsuit states that they somehow managed to sell concept art for the second game for $1 to some shell company and then bought it back for a bunch of money, essentially using the share value of the company to steal money from that company itself. They're essentially just trying to fraud the whole thing and make money.
Yeah.
It sounds like what they were looking for was investors in a sequel. And
yeah,
stole
because
from that pile.
Microsoft and a bunch of other people were interested in buying this company, and they quickly kicked out the original creators in an attempt to just make a bunch of money. So, I don't know. We don't get a lot of good news as far as this stuff goes, and I'm glad to see that they're willing to just straight up say that there's no lawsuit, even though it's on public record.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't look good for them. So,
Yeah, it does not.
It's a very Republican kind of a move. Nah, that doesn't exist.
nope, it's not real.
I mean, but no.
Yeah. So there's a lot of minutia to this, and you can look it up. ZA/UM is the creative studio that originally created this.
And we'll have links in the blog
It's like
as well.
flying in Neverland. You just gotta fucking believe.
Exactly.
Like the harder you believe, the quicker it'll go away. You know, I mean, that makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. You got something for us, Josh?
I do. We can't seem to get Microsoft and Activision Blizzard out of our heads today. So, I mean, it's another week, and it's yet another desperate attempt for Microsoft to just please let this deal go through. So Microsoft is willing to just throw Call of Duty right on the table. They're like, listen, guys, 10 years, same day, same game release. We don't want, it's not anti-competitive letting us buy this. I mean, it's like only the largest acquisition, like maybe ever. So you just let it happen. Just let it happen. They're probably not going to let it happen, guys.
Well, at least. So just to back up a little bit about what you're going to go into is one. It's the biggest hurdle in this acquisition has been Sony.
Yes.
And a lot of the fear from Sony is that Activision Blizzard is going to be taking away the butter for their bread. Call of Duty has been a console seller now for a few console generations, and Sony is very worried that Call of Duty will only show up on the Xbox and maybe the PC with no Sony release potentially. And that's what they're really worried about, is because honestly, if PlayStation 6 and the Xbox 2 comes out, because that's how that naming scheme works.
If the Xbox 2 comes out, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going.
So when those consoles eventually launch, they're worried that they won't have Call of Duty and that people will know that, right? Mm-hmm. So being that Call of Duty, the biggest game franchise period right now, isn't going to be on their next console potentially, freaks them the fuck out, and justifiably so. But go ahead, Josh, roll with that.
Yeah. So it looks like in the next week, the FTC is in fact going to be filing the antitrust lawsuit against them. It looks pretty positive, but I would say in defense of Microsoft, Phil Spencer has been nothing but open about wanting to get more games on more platforms. He's been I would say he's been more open to the distribution of games than Sony's being. I don't see the new God of War on my PC yet, do I? So but Microsoft says this will not cause any anti-competitive effects. The merger will benefit gamers and the U.S. gaming industry, especially as we face increasingly stiff competition from abroad. We are committed to continuing to work cooperatively with regulators around the globe to allow this transaction to proceed, but won't hesitate to fight to defend the transaction if required. Now, because it's not just the American government involved in this, the EU is, of course, they have a regulatory council. This is also being looked into over there. This is literally,
it's almost all first world governments.
Yes, it is. Well, I mean, yeah, duh. But it's crazy that this is kind of a worldwide thing. I mean, I guess it is huge.
It's one of the biggest acquisitions ever in history of
anything.
The history.
But I mean, Microsoft is willing to give them 10 years. I don't know why it's a 10-year. Are they just trying to?
So Microsoft is willing
bargain later in the future.
Not necessarily. There's always going to be a time limit. There's never a company that's going to say we're going to grant you something in perpetuity.
Yeah,
that's never going to happen.
Lots of potential money.
Yeah. But what Microsoft is willing to concede, and that's a word the word they've been using is making concessions.
Yeah.
A lot when it comes to these filings. So Microsoft is trying to offer Sony a deal that says that they will continue to put all Call of Duty games that Activision Blizzard create on Sony consoles for the next
same day release.
Same day release for the next 10 years. And that probably still isn't going to be enough for Sony. I'm going to throw in my 2 cents here in that the last few Call of Duty games have had Sony exclusive DLC and Sony exclusive maps and Sony exclusive time-gated content for quite some time now. Sony's gotten the better end of the Call of Duty deal for the last several Call of Duty games. And Sony has paid for that to happen. I imagine that even 10 years guarantee of Call of Duty on the table is not going to be enough for Sony. They're going to want to push for some exclusivity.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, Sony's the biggest in the gaming industry, right? Right, they're the biggest company in the gaming industry
Sony?
right now. Yeah,
no. Microsoft and Activision Blizzard are both bigger than they are.
Oh, okay. So this is really just them trying to. It's not like the mean kid at the top of the pile just trying to keep everybody else down. They're really wanting to stay competitive.
They lose a lot of relevancy if they lose Call of Duty. The PlayStation 4, the reason the PlayStation 4 did better than the Xbox One is Call of Duty. Call of Duty launched for the PlayStation 4 almost a month ahead of the Xbox One. So that it's actually kind of, Call of Duty is a big deal to all consoles.
Yes, of course. I mean, it's like you said,
it's the biggest deal.
It's the biggest franchise right now. So.
And if it hadn't been for the fact that Call of Duty had timed exclusivity on the PlayStation 4, it may not have been the winner of the last generation's console wars, right? So Call of Duty is as big as the platforms themselves.
Yeah.
And it does have to be remembered that like the Call of Duty is like the tent pole of the gaming industry right now. It is what every game wants to be. And that's why we've seen so many Call of Duty clones in so many years I mean, like, this game makes more money than all of Blizzard titles combined, including their subscription services. Call of Duty is just a fucking
That's why they
juggernaut.
release one every year.
Yeah. So, with all that said,
I guess the final idea behind all this is does Sony have enough clout to, like, because I'm sure there's other people, like other companies and stuff that are that don't want the merger to go through because, mergers.
Yeah.
But is Sony going to have enough clout to get it in? What do you think the merger is going to go through? Just your opinion. Do you think it's going to go through?
I think there's certainly a chance. Yeah, as long as Microsoft can show that this is not monopolistic, then yes.
Monopoly is a board game.
I don't think there's enough public awareness for this deal to fail.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be enough greased palms that, like, your average layman, it doesn't know that this is happening, right? Any person who doesn't play games isn't following Blizzard Activision merger with Microsoft.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, do you think this is their merger is a net negative for the gaming industry or a net positive?
I think
we won't know.
any progressive step for every AAA company is a net negative for gaming as a whole. I am firmly anti AAA games in all forms, regardless of how good those games are. Like, as good as Ragnarok is, it is a net negative for gaming as a whole, in my opinion. And that's specifically from the weird viewpoint that all AAA games, in my opinion, detract from the art form that is games as a whole. Not because the games aren't art, not because they're amazing. Ragnarok is a great example of something that is artfully amazing, right? But every game that's produced like that, at its core, has parts removed and pulled and taken away to make money. Ragnarok could have been so much better if you had the same people developing it, but without the pressures and ties that are required of a AAA game.
Without the crunch.
If it had been made by a AA or a indie studio and with the same people, it would have been a better game.
If Sony, the publisher, wasn't breathing down their necks to make sure that they hit a release date.
It's a really weird stance to take, but it's just every multi-million-dollar company that is making games, those games would be better if they were not made with that constant lens of this needs to make money.
Yeah.
Because for me, video games are an art form. Right. Now, it's true that video games have to make money.
Yeah.
Like, if they don't make money, they don't make their value back, the company gets shut down or they can't progress. And that's a truth of the matter. So this is really a theoretical point of view I have. But to me, video games are art, and every percentage you take away of that art to make money is a detraction. And 90% of all AAA games are there to make money.
I think to sum it up, if I'm to put words in your mouth, is that we're talking about capitalism getting into art, right? Like, at the end of the day, it's we're taking art and manipulating it into capitalism.
Yeah, I think a good way to put that is, like, we look at Ragnarok. Again, I'll use that example.
It's a good example.
It's an amazing game, right? And it's gotten there from a long line of God of War games. You look at the first God of War, the second God of War compared to Ragnarok, they're entirely different games, right? Yeah. But we could have gotten a Ragnarok 15 years ago if it was made by an indie company that had the means to make such a game, right? Like, the narrative and the storytelling that really rounds out Ragnarok, that makes it more than just a third-person action brawler. Like, you don't need $100 million to make a good narrative. Right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's a complete side tangent from what you guys were talking about, but
I mean, not really. It totally ties in.
Yeah. So when it comes to these, these mergers of these massive companies, to me, it's like ants arguing whether the humans are doing the right thing. Like, they're so far beyond and above us that it's just, what does it matter? They're going to make hundreds of millions of dollars no matter what happens. So, I feel for the programmers and developers and the artists and all the people who, like, all the time, I will try to keep this tangent short. We see AAA games that have so much promise.
Yeah.
There's so many AAA games that come out looking amazing, and those artists put in so much work, and the animators and all these things. But the gameplay itself suffers because the money people got to it.
Call of Duty is a perfect example.
Call of Duty, Diablo Immortal, like, just recent examples. Like, at the end of the day, you can put in all this effort into making a game good, but if it isn't monetized in the way that the money people want, like, it just gets
then oftentimes ghosted. It doesn't happen.
Right, yeah. And it's just unfortunate. So, in my opinion, if I'm going to wrap it back around the original article, the merger of Activision Blizzard with Microsoft, I don't know how to feel about it yet. I do not feel that Activision and Blizzard have really done enough to prove that they're not, like, pieces of shit at the executive level.
Yep.
Yeah. The day-to-day programmers and all the people working, like, I feel for you. All of us here, maybe even Josh, had the dream of working at Blizzard, even though we never even got into game development. The idea of working on StarCraft or Diablo or Warcraft or these things, Like that
Just
was
being
the
a part of the
company.
industry. Yeah.
I used to make boss guides hoping that I could follow in the footsteps of Josh
something.
Allen Lore,
Yeah.
who used to run the tank spot, hoping to do the same thing because he ended up being a core, employee for Activision Blizzard. So it was, it's a dream. And it's a dream of almost every developer to be on Activision Blizzard, what I hope that happens, just to bring it back to the end there, is I hope that the acquisition turns into a better work environment for everybody that works at Activision Blizzard. That's my hope. Like at the end of the day, if that's what happens, then good.
I think the thing I care about the most is the unionization push out of all this. Like the unionizing, it's a whole topic, but if anybody deserves it, like video game developers are up there.
Yeah.
Video games are the media now for money, and you deserve to have protections. I know.
People, you talk to a layman and they would say like why are we talking about game developers when we need to talk about the rail worker unionizers, right? And if you don't think about it very much, it makes a lot of sense. Like they are integral to
I would tell those people they both need it.
Yes. And while those people are integral to commerce, so are video games now. It's the world's leading industry in entertainment, and it can't be ignored. Like we exist because video games have gotten as big as they are. We wouldn't have alternative media in the form of podcasts and live streams and entertainment. Like what?
Fucking Let's Plays.
Watching people play video games is as big of an industry as Hollywood. So it's mind blowing. It's an industry that can't be ignored.
Since you, fucking railway. Anyway,
we won't go there. We talk about video games on this podcast.
Congress can force the companies to take the fucking deal too. There you go. I'm just gonna say that, and then we can just move on. Move on.
Yeah. Going back to video games and indie developers specifically, hey, let's talk about Valheim.
Oh, yes.
Oh!
So the Mistlands update has popped onto the
that?
beta
That
access.
was my boner hitting the bottom of the desk.
So Mistlands is coming out.
It's like a tree punching a rock.
Now, it's an interesting update. So we've talked amongst ourselves about like getting back into Valheim because
a little bit.
Valheim was a big moment for all of us. That's when Josh is first getting his PC and can join us. So Valheim, it ticks a lot of boxes for us. It's a game that you can have multiple players advancing all together in a survival crafting format, and it's rich in, it's not rich in a lot, but because it's a fairly basic game, but it is a well thought out world, and it's a cool Norse fantasy theme, and we all enjoy it. Our Discord channel was called Gjallarhorn, right? Or Gjallarhonk.
Yeah,
so we had a
Viking goose icon for it.
We had a lot of fun with the theme, and brought it into gameplay and almost like a role play, right? So it's got a special place in our hearts. Now we're finally, for the first time other than Hearth and Home, getting some new content and something that brings us a new biome that's been promised for a long time.
Definitely.
So Mistlands, one of the coolest things for me is not only are they doing a new biome, new enemies, a new boss, they're also bringing in magic. Because up until now, the only magic there's been is essentially theorizing its existence up to this point.
If you can keep the spoilers mild, I've tried really hard not to spoil too much for myself what Mistland has to offer as far as content.
So as far as content, I will try to avoid spoilers. We are looking.
There was magic.
Yeah, we are looking at
into it.
Yeah, we are looking at the Mistlands trailer, so you can kind of see what's going on. It doesn't show much in terms of enemies, the boss, or anything like that. It's basically showing.
Magic stick though.
It's going to show you the biome. It's going to show you a couple of enemies. It's going to show you a little bit of magic use. But what I'm really looking forward to is an update in terms of combat. So we get this new magic use. You're going to be like. They're introducing, without getting too specific, there's going to be a little necromancy. There's going to be a little bit of arcane use. There's going to be a little bit of elemental use. Dope. And what I'm hoping, what is out there right now is fairly basic. And as basic as Valheim gets, like you still have to build multiple things to make this magic stuff work. It's going to introduce new food recipes that are going to allow you to make this magic thing work, and new items that have to be crafted in order to make this magic thing work. So it is one of those things where like you are not going to be able to cast Fireball the moment you pop out as a character. It's going to take a lot of progression and starting to get into the new content before that kind of thing happens. So it is something that you have to work your way up to. But it's a combat update. And something that I think was desperately needed in the beginning, because once you nail Valheim combat, it's easy to master, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, yeah, it's easy to master. So to see that we're getting some neat trickery. Again, without being too specific, because I didn't know we were going spoiler free here. Without being too specific, it has some major implications for how you are going to be doing combat.
Yeah.
So that's neat.
There are, if you listen to this podcast and you play a lot of video games, you'll know that there's some games that if you get spoiled on them, it's a whatever burger, right? And there's other games that like it will ruin the experience. I don't think Valheim is that far.
Yeah.
But the way it came out of the blue and the weird uniqueness it had to it when you were playing it, and the fact that it reminds me of like a low magic D&D setting, the original game. It's like, I've played a million games with all kinds of magic and fucking abilities and whatnot, and like being able to play Valheim and be like, to discover something like the hammer had an AoE attack.
Yeah.
It's just like being like, oh, I made this thing. What does it do? Oh, that's awesome, right? It doesn't ruin the game if you know that beforehand, but it takes away something, right? So when we all get onto Valheim, I don't remember the specifics, but it was really nice being able to like, for the most part, being able to all discover that together.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the discovery was half the fun of Valheim.
And I think that's where there's this extremely tense dichotomy in Valheim where Hearth and Home came out and added a bunch of new recipes for building and crafting and food recipes and whatnot that were the supplemental content the game needed to feel more fleshed out.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough content for me to want to start the game over and play again.
I would say it was almost like my idea of content is new experiences. So for this, it didn't have content.
Yeah.
It was not a content patch. It was a quality of life patch.
And on top of that, before Hearth and Home came out, they had an update where one of the problems we had is that every time you manipulate the voxel grid of the game, so you're doing terraforming, you're raising or lowering terrain, or you're leveling it out, all those changes for the layman, essentially, the game had to keep track of every individual change, which meant when you build a big base for the 5-6 people we had playing, like the frame rate would drop to a crawl, trying to go back to your base, right? And they've since fixed that. But that's one of those things where, again, better fleshing out, better quality there, but it's not worth playing through the game again. So we keep having these moments where it's like, okay, they're making the game better, but we played up through all the way to the end. We managed to, on day 365, if you guys don't remember, we spent a whole year in-game. On the last day of the year, we killed the final boss. We had a screenshot.
We have a great screenshot,
fantastic,
man.
And there just has yet, like you said, been enough further actual, quantitative content to continue playing. I would love to jump back into Mistlands, especially with this beta. But yet again, I've held out this long. And I can wait a little bit longer as much as I don't want to. I thought about it at least once a week for months. I could just re-download Valheim. It's right here. I could just try it out myself. But the one thing I've heard from the people who jumped into the Mistlands beta right away was that the combat is the combat's known for being difficult, but this is just bonkers. These are people who've been playing the game since it came out. They have all the best in slot gear, and they're getting their asses handed to them. That tells me that more than likely that's probably going to get tuned down a bit. Because, even the planes was a bit much. We first got into playing those mosquitoes and the goblins, they'd
one-shot us from fucking a mile away.
Yeah. But a little bit of practice and a little bit of gearing up, and you were able to not safely, but routinely being able to take care of them. From what it sounds, a little bit I've read, the combat in Mistlands is, it doesn't matter how good you are or how good you are. It's just a sheer luck whether you survive these fights or not, which is a bit too much, in my opinion, for what Valheim is. Valheim it's on that Dark Souls kind of scale of like, it's going to kick your shit in if you're not taking it seriously.
Oh, yeah. The first time you run into a troll, it's a big fucking deal.
Even just the fucking goblins.
Yeah.
Like, if you weren't paying it, like, I remember the first time we ran into the goblins, what are these things? Oh, these little foolings, right? And they just
push our
shit on you.
Yeah.
Clapped them cheeks.
Mm-hmm. So, knowing that it's in beta and knowing that, like, if you make a new world and you explore the Mistlands, up until this update, they had no content. So if you wanted to experience this new beta, you had to make a new world because it had to regenerate the Mistlands. Right?
Yeah.
So I think yet again, as much as I want to, personally, I think I'm going to wait. But
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend waiting. Like, if you played the original Valheim or you played some and you never finished it, now's kind of a great a time as any to, like, go ahead and play through.
It's been a year. Oh, it's been a year since since Hearth and Home. So
yeah, and we stopped playing quite a
months
ways
before that.
Yeah. There's
so,
a lot of content there to enjoy.
I think we could probably jump in, have a great time, enjoy ourselves, experience Mistlands. I would just hate to see like the release schedule tightened up, and they're gonna have another big update in 5-6 months, and then not have the want to play.
I don't know. I mean, they originally had an entire. What's the word I'm looking for? A plan.
Yeah.
There's a word for it.
There is, but that's what I was looking for too, and I didn't.
They had a plan for all the things they were going to release, and then the game released, and it was 50,000 times bigger than they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And suddenly they had to spend all their time fixing bugs and updating, behind the scenes stuff, back end stuff, user experience. So adding new content wasn't a focus. And I mean, you can't blame them for that. That no one, you see this game, you're like, there's no way this game is going to be like the biggest game of the fucking year. And then it was. So
they did the right thing, and we're like, oh shit, people really love this game. Let's focus on making this a better experience rather than just cranking out new content.
We want it to be stable and remove bugs and allow people to play it and all that. So I can't blame them. They got my money. I got my experience out of it. And even if like it never went any farther, I'll be happy for spending the $20 fucking we got out of the experience of that game. So just to have Mistlands come back, I think I'm going to do them a favor by trusting in them and waiting for it to fully come out before I play it again.
Also, roadmap.
Roadmap is the word, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the word I was looking for. But they had to scratch it. They're like, this is too much. They had only a handful of people working on the game. They've since hired a bunch. And it's exciting. For me, even, it's exciting the concept that if this continues to do well. If Mistland releases and Mistland does well and they buy more, I'm excited to see what next game they put out. Yeah. Which is going to be in many, many, many years. If they have, the original roadmap had a lot of content ideas that they had planned, and they, quote unquote, have scrapped it since.
I mean, we still have 2 more biomes, right? We have the Firelands and
biomes and
something else.
Like the wolves, the pirate update and all that. So, I mean, I could easily see this game getting updates for another 3 or 4 years before they would consider making a different game. Yeah. But who knows? It's exciting.
Definitely.
Very exciting.
So.
That said, we're only halfway through the news and we got about 15 minutes left. So let's move on.
Okay. I can make mine pretty quick because this is kind of proxy news. Most people are going to be aware that the newest Pokemon game released, it's like, Plaid and Sylvester? What's it called?
It's Scarlet and Violet.
Scarlet and Violet. If you've been following the news at all.
Plaid and Argyle.
Would
be the, yes. I like that.
This particular iteration of Pokemon has shit the bed. I think that's a mild way of putting it. There's been a lot of problems, both technical, user interface, user experience, and content-wise. And I think after many, many years of Pokemon selling roughly a bajillion copies on day one, I think this one 10 million copies in the first 3 days.
Yep.
Right? Which, that's so much.
Yeah, it's huge.
And after Arceus, however you want to pronounce it, and the experience of that, and the fact that, the mainline Pokemon games try to do something new with everything, this one was kind of the first real bad Pokemon main release I think I can name. Right? There's a million complaints as to the old ones, but my brother has picked it up and he's been playing it. I took the higher road and didn't give him shit for playing it. But basically, there are some cool new things. Every new Pokemon game, they have some new gimmick. So whether that was breeding Pokemon in the older ones or weird multiplayer stuff, to the newer ones, they had like the
Mega Evolution.
Mega Evolutions, where mid-combat, you make your Pokemon super powerful. He liked some things. So if I do a quick run through here, as far as the upsides, there's a lot more time-saving traversal things. Being able to fly and bike around from much earlier on makes particularly doing certain stuff in the Pokemon game much easier. You can set out your first slot Pokemon, and it'll wander around and range around your character, auto-fighting any Pokemon in the area, which is an interesting way of cheaply and easily leveling them up.
Hey, Pikachu, be an asshole.
Yeah. TMs, which were one use, learn a move for a certain Pokemon, can now be crafted or found in the wild, which is an interesting take.
I like that.
Kinda neat.
Yeah.
Okay.
The new shtick is terrestrializing. When you activate it, your Pokemon's type is changed to its Terra type, which can be anything as far as he can tell so far. So you can get a same type attack bonus. You essentially get to modify the Pokemon's typing on the fly.
Okay.
Which is a huge design space
Yeah.
change. Being able to, I don't know how often you can do it, how cheap it is to do. But if you're, especially when it comes to PvP, which there's a hardcore section of Pokemon fans who do PvP, being able to be like, my fire Pokemon's now fire/water, which is a crazy change, right? The biggest problems have been glitches in performance, noticeable lag and frame drops in certain situations. Battles haven't been too big a problem, but when free roaming, he's getting lots of pop-in and chunky lag. So
Poppins, isn't that what you feed the Pokemon?
Very close, yeah, Poffins. The early game tutorial segment is by Nintendo standards, even that long and extremely hand-holding. If he said if I'd had a button that says I've played Pokemon at all before, he would have appreciated it, right? The graphics look like shit, and I mean, I'd heard about the graphics problems people complain about Arceus. I played it; it wasn't that bad. And this is even worse. The voice acting, the game has none, apparently, that he's seen so far. And the new mechanic, terrestrializing, he says, where do we put it here? Compared to the Z moves and Mega Evolutions and Dynamaxing, it sounds like they might have gotten rid of it in favor of this new mechanic. So it seems like they might have just been making a new mechanic for the sake of making a new mechanic, right? So who knows?
I'm just going to throw it out there. Like, this Pokemon game, or these Pokemon games were supposed to push the Nintendo Switch to its utter max, according to Game Freak. But, like...
And what is this we're watching?
This is Monster Hunter Rise on the Nintendo Switch. Looks infinitely better and doesn't have any of the same LOD poppin' issues and fucking garbage that we're seeing from these Pokemon games. Yeah. Infinitely better looking, smoother running. So... there's no excuse for this.
Rumor has it this bitch is coming to Xbox and PlayStation.
Cool. The Switch can do some shit, is what I'm saying, and Game Freak just shit the bed.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know enough to know if this is a Game Freak has gotten lazy situation where they know they're going to sell 10 million copies in 3 days.
Might have just used the wrong engine,
or if there was, the developers and the artists and the programmers did their best with what they were given.
Yeah.
But I mean, Pokemon is similar in that kind of meta level to Call of Duty, right? They pump these things out left, right, and center.
Yeah.
And you have to ask, like, how many times can you try to reiterate the formula? They had it down between silver and gold and black and white and ruby and sapphire. They found, like, we add just one new mechanic. Like, now you can... like do Pokemon beauty battles, right? 99% of the game's the same. We know what we're doing. We're just adding in one little new feature here and there, and they had that formula down. And then they made the shift to 3D, I think with X and Y or black and white, whatever it was. And they keep trying to like one up themselves. They're jumping the shark, as we say. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt their profits, but I think this is like when you have a batch of like baby fish die off. Like the fishermen aren't going to feel it for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But, if your hatchery has problems down the line, this is going to hurt. And if they release yet another sub-performance Pokemon game mainline after this one, they're going to start seeing hardcore lifing Pokemon people start dropping the game.
I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but it's like they said Pokemon isn't video games, it's merchandising.
Yes.
And that's like, I feel like that's kind of where Game Freak is. Like, it doesn't matter. We can crank it. We can crank out a baby shit yellow looking kind of a fucking thing, spread it around and sell 10 million copies in a single weekend. And like, honestly, I haven't seen, sure, people are returning it, but there's not the crazy, like, I haven't seen a crazy amount of backlash like you did for like Cyberpunk, or maybe that's just because the style of gamer is different.
Pokemon hasn't failed extremely hard ever. Right. Yeah. So this is their most obvious first stumble. And as we know, like, your first stumble is never the problem. You're still going to sell a shit ton of copies. It's if you continue to stumble year after year, then you lose the gamers. But you make a really good point. Unlike something like Call of Duty, which is a video game franchise, Pokemon's a fucking experience. Yeah. Right? They've got Pokemon toe moisturizers. Right?
Yes. Like, I mean,
at the end of the day, if the games begin to suck, it's not going to stop the merch. There's always going to be shows.
Everyone's always going to love Pikachu.
Dude, everybody still wants a Pikachu plush.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, it'd be interesting to see how profits look after 6 months compared to whatever the last mainline Pokemon game was.
I think it's still going to sell. I mean, I don't think it's going to impact sales that much. Not this time.
No, yeah, it's never the first time to do something bad, right?
Well, and then the other thing is like, Nintendo doesn't do, like, they don't update things, right? Like, I mean, because you could say, well, in a couple of months, this is going to get better because of updates and whatnot, but those are probably going to be few and far between.
No, they throw out patches.
Okay. Nintendo's really not, he's right, though. They're not really known for, like, major overhaul patches.
Sure. Yeah,
Trying to just follow what patches their games get is compared to all the PC games, right? It's an entirely different world
compared to the Xbox and the PlayStation, where they have day one patches that they're like, please apply this before playing the game, please. And
if there's a Nintendo day one patch, you probably don't even get notified about it.
Oh yeah, probably not.
It just happens.
Well,
in the background.
I mean, what you probably have to do is pay $5 a month for the for the Nintendo eShop, and then you have to get the eShop Platinum Plus double DLC news notification widget for the home screen of the Nintendo Switch before you get that news, which is going to be the only way that you can click a link to.
And then you got to fight a toilet ghost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, church.
It's a poison dark type.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of toilet ghosts, Josh, you have more news.
I do. So once again, staying underneath the umbrella of Microsoft, Starfield from Bethesda is going to be released. It's slated for 2023. And recently, Todd Howard went on Lex Friedman's podcast.
Lex Friedman.
Sorry about that.
You were going to say he went on a cocaine binge.
Nope. Went on Lex Friedman's podcast and talked about Starfield a little bit. Now, he talked about how while it is a, it's a space game, it's a survival game, it is not going to be on the level of No Man's Sky survival. It's going to be very much like, you have to monitor some things, but we're not just going to leave you adrift out in space. Go fuck yourself kind of a feel. So it's going to have the classic Bethesda style dialogue, which, I mean, if you like it, good for you. If you find it
for great memes.
Yep. If if it's serviceable, whatever, it's fine. But there's going to be a fuckload of planets in this game. I'm kind of excited for the survival light aspect. He also talked about how he thinks hardcore survival games are a bit of a fun. It's a bit of a fun killer when you're having to micromanage your fuel, your resources, the food, all that. That's a fun killer. You don't want to micromanage. So they are really leaning into what he's calling survival light kind of a feel. So you're going to have a lot of those mechanics, but it's going to be a lot more stress-free. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of neat.
I want to read a little bit of an excerpt from Kotaku. So according to Howard, we shouldn't expect Starfield to be a rugged space sim where the player needs to track a whole bunch of resources, else they risk getting stranded in space. He says there's some effort involved, speaking to the challenge of managing your resources and exposure to environmental hazards, but it isn't hardcore. The scope of survival and challenge has been tweaked and dialed back during the development, which started right after the release of Fallout 4. He says, running out of fuel in a spaceship just stops your game, we found. You'll be playing the game, and I ran out of fuel. Okay, I guess I'll just wander these planets trying to mine for fuel so I can get back to what I was doing. It's just a fun killer. Howard speculates that a hardcore mode might be in store for the game in the future, but for now we can expect common enough challenges like needing to monitor your spacesuit for environmental hazards in space or on planets, but not a No Man's Sky level of making sure all your ship systems are perfectly fueled and operational.
And that's honestly kind of what drove me out of No Man's Sky the minutia was too much for me. It's like, it started to not be fun where I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to do this just so I can fucking explore. I'm so anxious to get out there and explore and see what there is. But first I have to mine a lot of fucking shit to even get my ship to fucking launch off the ground, let alone hyperspace or anything like that, So
you never tried Space Engineers.
This conversation and the crux of it, like I don't want to even, I do not want to overestimate how fundamental this is to games going all the way to tabletop role-playing games. The idea of survival and management of resources versus quote-unquote fun. Yep. So in a nutshell, if I had to throw my opinion out there, there are two types of games. There's the type of game where survival is the game, and it's fun because of that. Yep. It's not that, you have to keep track of the amount of torches you have in the dungeon. That it's, shit, we only have 3 torches left and we have 2 days back to the surface.
In some games, it's a feature.
It is a feature because the way you approach the game, there's an understanding that this is a survival game and you are going to fail if you're not prepared, which attracts a certain type of gamer, whether that's tabletop or video game, compared to those who see something like keeping track of resources, like you were saying, running out of fuel. And the problem there is at some point in history, a survival game where you're keeping track of resources because it's extremely important becomes something that you just do because it's expected of you, right? I think of Fallout's previous versions, Fallout 3 or 4, I get them confused in my head, but one of them had a hardcore mode where you had to keep food and water on you and you had to keep track of bullets and all this stuff.
Bullets had weight.
And bullets had weight. And when I played through the first time, I turned that on because to me that's I'm attracted to that because it provides a different experience. And I remember playing through, and so much of my time was spent in combat thinking, can I afford to use these rounds from this gun on this enemy, knowing that I have something harder coming at me? And that is a feeling and an understanding and a way of play that is fundamentally different from a other perfectly valid way of playing, which is I don't want to have to worry about that shit. Yep. Because what you're asking is, do you like horror movies? Do you like action movies? Yeah. You can have a horror action movie, but you're getting the worst parts of both genres, right?
Or the best.
If you're lucky, right?
Yes.
So we've been playing D&D a lot, and we're running an OSR game where I'm trying to, ease everyone in and work on the fact that keeping track of certain things is important because it's not so much that I want you to worry about the minutia. It's the minutia needs to be important, right? I need to know that you guys can see in a dungeon and you have a limited amount of seeing. That's torches, right? And lanterns, right? So when it comes to like this, and he's talking about, we don't want it to be like at the level of No Man's Sky. So what I think what I'm hearing is No Man's Sky, I haven't played it recently, but so many games, like I think RuneScape is a really good example of this, and I'll promise not to take over the mic too much longer.
That's okay.
And that the idea of survival, of keeping track of mundane resources, is taken to the nth degree, forgetting the original purpose of keeping track of these things, right? It's so that they had weight. So I'm glad to hear that Starfield is not going to try to shoehorn in a useless survival metric where it's like, we need you to worry about fuel. Why? Because if you run out of fuel, you can't go anywhere. Well, then what do? Well, you wait until you can get fuel. Like, that's not the point of survival. Like, if you had a game where fuel is important, that needs to be baked into your game design from the ground floor, right? That needs to be a part of the narrative. It needs to be a part of everything. And if it's not, then just get rid of it. It's fine. So I'm honestly glad to hear that they're going to be like, okay, this is like Skyrim. Skyrim has survival mechanics, right? No, it doesn't. And that's fine, because that's not what the game is.
That's what the game is.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like, that's what I was also glad to hear, that they're not trying to just, like, what if we could just edge this in here just a little bit, and then we'll grab a few more players from this demographic, and, like, I mean, we might lose a few here, but it's nice to be like, no, it's going to be Skyrim in space.
So it's interesting, because it's harder to balance between the ultra realistic simulation style difficulty and something that's super accessible and relatively easy, and maybe even has a narrative. It's really hard to balance those things.
You shouldn't try, because you're essentially trying to do two different things at once.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at. Right?
Do
one or do the other.
And that's kind of my point is, I play a lot of DayZ because I love that simulation, that survival simulation. If I cannot find a way to make a fire relatively quickly in my, after starting up DayZ, you're just going to die. You're going to starve, or you're going to freeze to death. And I like that. I like that part of the game. That to me is one of the reasons that I play. On the other hand, I love relatively simple games. Like I like the gamut, but it's because they do what they do well. Versus something like I've been playing Red Dead Redemption 2. And while that game is beautiful so far, the narrative has been great. The frustrating part is that it seems like they shoehorned in a stamina mechanic and the Deadeye mechanic, and doing things like having to manage what clothes I wear because it's too hot or too cold, or having to make sure that I keep my stamina up by running and eating at proper times and stuff like that. That feels like minutia that doesn't need to be there. And so far, while I am enjoying the game, that certainly detracts from my enjoyment of the game. I do not want to deal with that shit. I picked this game up because I wanted to enjoy a strong narrative in a beautiful setting, right?
I really think it is a holdover, because it is. Using that example, if you played Red Dead and they asked you, hey, you have a limited amount of inventory space, you know that the area you're going to is going to be hot. If you go buy a hot weather outfit, so shorts and a light t-shirt, whatnot, we're just going to auto-equip it to your character. But you're using up an inventory slot to make sure that your character is comfortable. Is that a choice you want to make? Because that is an interesting choice.
That is an interesting... Or
it's not, make sure that every real life 10 minutes you're drinking from your canteen so this overheat meter doesn't get too high. That's not fun. Right.
But instead they give you a default amount of inventory slots for each thing that, addresses each individual issue. So it just feels like it's there to be there instead of, furthering your immersion. Because honestly, having to go through a menu in Red Dead Redemption removes the immersion entirely. I should have little to no HUD and little to no menu.
I mean, you've played both No Man's Sky and Red Dead a lot. Like, what do you think of the survival elements of Red Dead? Like, are they worth being in there? Do you think the game would be better if they were removed or if they were kept in?
I think they're actually a necessary function they're kind of a whatever burger, but like the hunting is really cool. And you still get to sell the pelts off and whatnot, but then there's there's the whole camping aspect thing.
That's all fine.
And like a little bit of crafting, which I do enjoy some of the crafting stuff because you get to make your weapons better and all that stuff. So I think that's like that survival mechanic. It's so light grade that it's like, oh, dude, like whatever.
It's not. Dude, I have to disagree. When I have pop-ups on my screen that tell me like, hey, your stamina is getting a little bit too low, you should take care of that by doing this thing, that drives me nuts.
Okay, that's fair. But like I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm always like drinking whiskey and smoking cigarettes off people that I take that it happens.
But I was in the middle of a forced. It's almost like a escort quest, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times where you're just traveling and getting narrative during the travel.
Yeah,
that stuff should be super immersive, but it pops up a little warning that I'm too hot. Like, hey, you're too hot. You should change your clothes as a character and blah, blah. I didn't even have the option yet.
Yeah, I think that's also from like, I think because that shit kind of starts slacking off the deeper you get into the game.
Sure.
I think that's still tutorial business.
But that's because you're higher level and your stats are better and you can weather more different weather scenarios.
That is true. That is true.
So it might just be annoying for now, but like when I'm getting a pop-up for you should change your clothes before I've been introduced to that system yet, that means that shit was shoehorned in.
Yeah, very true. I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah, and it was weird. I'm in the middle of deep talk with who's the old guy?
Jose. I was going to say you're in the wagon wheel.
Yes.
I know exactly the scenario you're talking about.
And it tells me I need to change my clothes from my winter clothes
because you
to
get the flashing red sun and your thing. Yeah, I know exactly.
Yeah,
what you're
and it's telling, and it like I'm getting all of these notifications of like you are dying.
Yeah.
While I can't do anything about it, and I haven't even been introduced to the system yet.
I think this boils down to one of my most favorite quotes by one of my most favorite game designers, Sid Meier of Civilization and Pirates fame, where he said, "A game is a series of interesting choices. If your game is not providing you interesting choices, it's doing something wrong." That second sentence is mine. But like when it comes to survival elements, if I'm not having to make a choice where there are pros and cons to both sides, then that shouldn't be in there. Take it out of your game.
Okay,
right?
fair. Then there's not a pro and con choice to the survival aspect of the game. It's kind of just in there as a sidecar to the whole hunting, crafting aspect.
It's really not Red Dead's fault because so many games will shoehorn in survival-esque elements because they feel the need that, we need to have these in here because other games have them because it's expected.
GTA San Andreas had a similar thing. Remember where you had to eat or your weight would go down, but at least that had a cosmetic effect or whatever.
It was a new mechanic. I remember CJ was it San Andreas, you could gain weight, and it's like they put that in there because that was a thing they could do.
Yeah,
and that's fun and fine.
Yeah,
right. But yeah, having to worry about like temperature and clothing, like if I'm not making an interesting choice, how can I afford to carry different sets of clothing on me, or will this affect my reputation via my visual, what I look like compared to other factions? If you're just making it, I need to wait until I earn enough money that I can go buy this set of like this clothing and now I have it, it's not a problem anymore. Therefore, it's no longer a gameplay element anymore. Then why have it in the first place? Other than you're just trying to waste time and effort.
Yeah, they actually supply you your cold weather and warm weather outfits, like basic bitch ones. Yeah, once you get to that menu. But like they even supply the outfits for you, so it is very much just
okay. But the fact is that while I'm hunting, I'm being told that it's getting too hot. I'm like, okay. Well, shit.
Guess I'll take off my shirt.
No, now my choice is I don't get that option. My choice is I have to go back to my fucking tent where my wardrobe is so I can change clothes. If I had an option that was like carry an extra set of clothing on my horse, that might be different.
There is that option.
I don't have that option yet.
You just haven't gotten there yet.
Instead, the game's telling me to do stuff that I can't do.
Bad tutorial design. Which, if we've learned anything, tutorials are some of the hardest things to do in video games. Gentlemen, my bladder is the size of the survival elements in...
It's a Golgan from another time!
Yes, I need to pee.
Yeah, it's time to go, guys. We've gone long. We didn't have enough time to finish the rest of our stories, but next week, gentlemen.
Yeah, we got big ones.
We'll bring you back some stories.
That's right. Everybody in the live stream, hang around. We're going to be doing balcony time after this. For the rest of you, we love you, and we'll talk to you next week.
Love you.